For the longest time, the voice on your GPS or computer sounded, well, like a computer, right? It was robotic, kind of clunky, and you knew it was fake. But then, in just the last few years, something totally changed. All of a sudden, synthetic voices got smooth, natural, and almost eerily human. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the AI breakthrough that made all of that possible. I mean, if you've ever used Google Assistant or Siri or Alexa, you've heard it. That huge jump in quality, that wasn't just some small software update. No, it was a complete fundamental shift in how we teach machines to speak. The tech behind it is called WaveNet, and it basically threw out the old rulebook and wrote a completely new one. So to really get why WaveNet was such a game changer, we have to remember just how not great things were before. For a long, long time, text-to-speech was stuck deep in what you'd call the uncanny valley. You could understand it, sure, but listening to it for more than a few seconds just felt off. And this quote just hits the nail on the head. The old voices had this weird rhythm, right? The emphasis would be on the wrong word, there was zero emotion. It was kind of like watching a poorly animated character. You can tell something is just fundamentally wrong, and it makes the whole experience feel jarring and totally artificial. Okay, so how did those old systems actually make those sounds? Before WaveNet showed up, there were really two main ways to create a digital voice, and, well, both of them had some pretty big problems.
So on one side, you had what's called concatenative TTS. Honestly, the best way to think about this is a giant digital cut and paste job. A voice actor records thousands and thousands of tiny little sound bites, and the computer just stitches them together to make words. The problem, you could often hear the seams, and it was almost impossible to change the voice's emotion. Then, on the other side, you have parametric TTS. This used a math model to generate the sound. It was way more flexible, but it often sounded even more buzzy and robotic. Neither one was the perfect answer.
And that is exactly where DeepMind, the AI research lab, enters the picture. Back in 2016, they came out with a totally new way of thinking about this. It wasn't about assembling sound, it was about creating it from nothing. And they called it WaveNet. Okay, this is the most important part right here. Instead of gluing together little pieces of old recordings, WaveNet is a deep neural network that literally learns how to generate the raw audio waveform of a human voice, one tiny sample at a time. It's not playing a recording, it is creating the sound itself from the ground up. Now, that sounds incredibly complicated, and it is. But the core idea behind it is actually something we can all understand. It's all about learning by example, just on a scale that is hard to even imagine. So this is kind of like a simplified look inside WaveNet's brain. It's got this deep stack of network layers that lets the AI listen to thousands of hours of a real person talking. And by soaking all that data in, it doesn't just learn words, it learns the actual physics of that person's voice.
The whole process basically breaks down like this. First, it just digests a massive amount of real speech. Then, it starts to figure out the super complex rules of how one piece of a sound wave follows the next. And finally, when it's time to speak, it builds a brand new audio waveform, one single point at a time, an incredible 16,000 times every single second.
And this is where it gets really mind-blowing. This shows you the level of detail we're talking about. Because WaveNet is building the raw audio from scratch, it picks up on all the little things that aren't words, but that make a voice sound real. The tiny little breaths between phrases, the subtle smack of the lips. Those are the details that trick our ears into hearing a person instead of a program. Look, having a cool research paper is one thing, but getting an incredibly complex model like this to run on millions of phones all over the world, that's a whole different challenge. And the journey from the lab to your pocket happened at an absolutely breathtaking speed.
Just look at this timeline. In 2016, WaveNet is this fascinating idea that's way too slow to be useful. But just 1 year later, a huge performance boost makes it fast enough to actually power the Google Assistant. By 2018, it needs a lot less audio to create a new voice. And by 2019, they've got it down to just a few minutes of audio. That's incredible. I just want to pause on this number for a second. A 1,000 times improvement in performance in about a year. That is just a staggering feat of engineering. That was the magic bullet, the critical leap that took WaveNet out of a theoretical paper and turned it into the voice that answers your questions every day. But, of course, a technology this powerful has a flip side. When you can perfectly, and I mean perfectly, replicate a human voice, you open up a Pandora's box of really tough ethical questions that we're all just starting to deal with.
So researchers pretty quickly figured out that WaveNet could do more than just read text. It could do something they call content swapping. So imagine this. You take a recording of me speaking, and you keep my exact words, my tone, my pacing, but you seamlessly swap in someone else's voice.
And that right there leads us to the biggest question of all. What does it mean for our society, for trust, for our own identities, when a machine can convincingly impersonate literally anyone using just a few minutes of their voice? So the concerns are pretty clear. The ability to mimic people, whether they're alive or not, without getting permission, and of course, the huge potential for creating believable fake news and misinformation. Now, researchers have proposed solutions like putting in invisible digital watermarks that could flag an audio file as synthetic. They also point out that making a fake that's good enough for a meme is one thing, but fooling a real forensic expert is a whole lot harder. Still, the conversation is really just getting started.
So we'll leave you with this thought. WaveNet is, without a doubt, a technological marvel. It's changed how we talk to our devices every single day. But it also forces us to ask some really deep questions about what it means to be human in this new age of AI. If your voice, one of the most personal, intimate parts of your identity, can be perfectly copied, what is it exactly that makes it yours?